record. All right, so we're recording. So we're still doing part of Unit 1. This is Module 2, utilizing threat data and intelligence. All right, so threat actors. Who are threat actors? This is a term that is used to describe individuals or entities who are responsible for cyber incidents against enterprise, governments, and users. Hacktivists, nation-state actors, insider threats, and others are all technically threat actors. Commodity malware. This is malware sold by other threat actors that can be customized for specific attacks. You've seen a real rise in this, especially in the last 10 years. You can go out and get just, generic stuff, or you can actually have people build it for you. Right, types of threat actors. We kind of went over this briefly before. So hacktivists, this is a group that is strongly motivated by ideology. In the past, attacks by hacktivists were a means of making political statement or performing retaliation. Today, most hacktivists work through disinformation campaigns by spreading fake news. I hate that term, but spreading fake news and supporting conspiracy theories. And that is where a lot of hacktivist work is now. Nation-state actors, state-sponsored attackers who launch the APTs, advanced persistent threats, are also another word for this, nation-state actors. So they launch cyber attacks against government foes. They're directed towards businesses in foreign countries with the goal of causing financial harm or damage to the enterprise's reputation. It's not always businesses. It can be other like government entities that they can go after. Insider threats, we've talked about this quite a bit. This is a threat to an enterprise that comes from its own employees, contractors, and business partners. There are two types. There's the intentional insider threat and the unintentional insider threat. Honestly, I'm not sure which one of these is worse. An intentional insider threat with a lot of security clearance is bad. However, if you have an unintentional insider threat from someone who's just not trained and acting like an idiot, it can be almost as bad. So we're going to go through this table here, threat actor description and explanation. So competitors launch attack against an opponent's system to steal classified information. They may steal new product research or a list of current customers to gain competitive advantages. Brokers sell their knowledge of a weakness to other attackers or governments. Individuals who uncover weaknesses do not report it to the software vendor, but instead sell them to the highest bidder, who is willing to pay a high price for unknown weaknesses. So this is basically the opposite of what you would do for a bug bounty board. And then there's cyber terrorists. Attack a nation's network and computer infrastructure to cause disruption and panic among citizens. Targets may include small group of computers or networks that can affect the largest number of users, such as computers that control electrical power grid of a state or region. Basically, with cyber terrorists, they try to go for, and no pun intended, the most bang for their buck. Organized crime, moving from traditional crime activities to more rewarding and less risky online attacks. Organized criminal syndicates are usually run by a small number of experienced online criminal networks who do not commit crimes themselves, but they act as entrepreneurs. Basically, they have the ideas, and then they hire other people to do it for them. Then there's shadow IT. Employees become frustrated with the slow pace of acquired technology, so they purchase or install their own equipment or resources in violation with company policies. Installing personal equipment, unauthorized software, or using external cloud resources can create a weakness or expose sensitive corporate data. Now, the other part of this is also sometimes when you get these, they can, if you don't get them from a verified vendor, you can get some really interesting software in there. You can have preloaded spyware, you can have malware, you can have backdoors, you can have all sorts of things, which is why it's important for employees to purchase through a verified vendor. Shadow IT, it depends. It can be intentional and unintentional. You know, you have people that will buy cheap because they're getting, if it's an intentional situation, sometimes they're getting some sort of money in order to buy these. They're getting a kickback, or they're one of the ones that have installed the stuff on the equipment and they're getting information out of it. The unintentional ones are the people that are just like, I want this cheap, I'm going to go get it. I don't want to wait for you. I don't want to go through official channels. I just want to do it. They're both damaging, and they both can be used as pivot points into your network. So classifying threats. The 4 categories of these threats are as follows: known knowns, threats that both threat actors and security personnel are aware of, such as virus that has been active for several years; defense, established technologies and devices such as antivirus solutions and firewalls; known unknowns, vulnerabilities that the organization is aware of in their system, but outside threat actors have not discovered; defense, actions taken by the organization. So known unknowns are, you're aware, these are always fun to figure out. So you're aware that there's, whoa, good Lord. You're aware that there is something there, but your threat actors don't know. So the organization itself has to figure out how to fix it. Yes, sorry about that. I have one cat who I love very dearly. She's the only cat in the house that wears a magnetic collar that goes to a hut that I jokingly call something I'm not going to repeat, the blank hut, where she goes in when she's being a jerk and all the other cats want to kick the tar out of her. So yeah. So she just got in a fight and decided, I'm going to climb mom because they won't attack mom to get me. So she's sitting on my shoulder right now. Oh, stop growling. And I'm pretty sure that anything that she ever, like, if she was translated into human speak, I'm pretty sure all of her language would have the F word in it, and that's all she knows how to say. So yeah. Okay, so next we have unknown knowns, known to threat actors, but not known to security professionals. These are often called zero-day attacks, as they give victims no time to prepare or defend against your attacks. And then you have your unknown unknowns, security threats that are hidden from both threat actors and security professionals. So these are those kind of like, when you're the threat actor, these are kind of your bonus candy that you're like, oh, look what I found, and no one else knows about it, and these guys don't know about it either. And then it turns into a 0-day. So that's what those are. Does that make sense to you guys? I don't really like how they classify them. I think there's too many known, unknown, known, and it can be really fun to know. I know what I don't know what I know. Do you know? Do you know? You know, that's how I feel when I go through this list. But hopefully it makes sense to everybody. Okay. So this is basically your little table of the known, unknown thing. So known to self, known to others, unknown to others, and you have your little 4-square thing. I'm sure all of you have seen this at some point in school as something like this. So known to self, known to others, that's open, published vulnerabilities and attacks. Unknown to self, known to others, blind, security exploits only known to threat actors. Unknown to others, but known to self, hidden, internal security vulnerabilities not detectable from the outside. There's your key right there. Not detectable from the outside. And unknown to self and unknown to others, those are the vulnerabilities not yet discovered by threat actors or security researchers. Yeah, it's basically a 4-square / pie chart of your unknown knowns. If you look, the PowerPoints are out there, and this is a good one to print screen for yourself or save the slide on. Okay. Which type of hacker attempts to probe a system with an organization's permission for weaknesses and then privately report back to that organization? And I really hope none of you pick D. Good job. Yeah, this is one that we've gone over. A leprechaun. Yeah, that would be the green hat hacker. Yes, very good. Yes, so white hat hackers. This is what you guys are training for. Threat data and intelligence. So organizations are pooling their experiences and knowledge gained about the latest attacks with broader security communications. Key risk indicator, or KRI, is a metric of the upper and lower bounds of a specific indicators of a normal network activity. This is your, it's like a baseline, but instead of having just the baseline, you have your upper baseline and your lower baseline. Data based on standard occurrences within a network or environment is monitored and used to create a database of KRIs. Indicator of compromise, or IOC, shows that a malicious activity is occurring but is still in the early stages of an attack. When a KRI exceeds its normal bounds, it could be, but not always, evidence of an IOC. Making IOC information available to others can prove to be of high value. So why do you think that's of high value? Hello? So why do you think letting other people know what indicators of compromise you've seen in your attacks is valuable, is what I'm asking. Basically, yes, transparency. But also, if you let them know, then there are less surprise IOCs so that you can respond faster to those when you see them. And now what we have machine learning and AI, the more data that you gather and share and is put into those programs, the faster you can find those patterns. Threat intelligence sharing can also aid in other areas such as incident response, handling a cyber attack or data breach, vulnerability management, identifying and addressing security vulnerabilities, risk management, controlling threats to assets, security engineering, building systems to resist attacks, detection and monitoring, uncovering and managing vulnerabilities. Intelligence cycle, the process through which raw cybersecurity data becomes useful threat intelligence information. Okay, which phase of intelligence cycle feeds back into the requirements phase? They didn't really go after this one, so just pick what you think. Dissemination, analysis, financial, feedback. And I think it pretty much tells you in the name. Yep. What feeds back into it? The feedback. Yep, exactly. Okay. Difference between data, information, and knowledge. So there's element and definition. So data is discrete, objective facts. Information, this is organized data that's been processed, so it has meaning and value. Knowledge, expert skills, and experience applied to information in order to make informed decisions. So if you think about it, it's kind of, oh hush, grumpy cat. It's kind of like using the downward arrow or upward arrow, however what you want to see it. Data is your raw stuff. Then you have your organized data, and then you have knowledge, which is data or information that's had your skills and experience applied to it. Okay, the intelligence cycle. Now, a lot of these cycles, they're called a cycle for a reason, they go in a circle. So requirements, collection, analysis, dissemination, feedback, and then it just goes right back into the loop. Requirements set the high-level goals for the threat intelligence program: collection, process of gathering information to address the most important intelligence requirements; analysis, processing finished information and raw data into a format usable by the organization; dissemination, decisions concerning the use and distribution of the results from the analysis phase are made. Basically, all of the stuff that you collect and analyze isn't always disseminated. That's why there's the dissemination phase, because sometimes when you have all of that information and the raw data and everything, it gets just purely overwhelming. And if you don't put it in the right format or share it with the right people, it just backfires, and it doesn't matter how much information you have, you just overwhelm them. And the only thing that you get is them fighting against you. And then finally, feedback regarding how effective the threat intelligence was. The feedback becomes input for the requirements phase to improve the overall intelligence cycle. And then you just loop back again to the next and go on. Yeah, I think that they base this off of the intelligence cycle from the military. You'll see a lot of that in cybersecurity. If you've been in the military, you'll see a lot of familiarity with the things that we have here. Open source intelligence. Threat intelligence that's freely available is a vital resource. The most basic level of open source intelligence, or OSINT, typically consists of public lists of threat indicators that anyone can download. Users of these public lists are also encouraged to upload their own malware samples to be analyzed. A more formalized level of OSINT sharing is conducted through trusted communities where official membership is required and the members exchange their own threat information. Some of the cyber information sharing and collaborations programs, or CISCP services, include analyst-to-analyst technical exchanges, I don't know why I'm having a hard time with letters today, CISCP analytical products, cross-industry orchestration, digital malware analysis. The final level of OSINT is composed of similar organizations to share information unique to their specific industry. The organizations that share OSINT are called information sharing and analysis communities. Challenges of open source intelligence. So data comes from a variety of sources and formats. Open IOC, or Open Indicators of Compromise, was developed as an open framework for sharing OSINT in a machine-readable format. Several concerns concerning relevance, accuracy, privacy, and timeliness surround public information sharing centers. So a lot of times when you have an attack or a breach, I'm sure you guys have noticed the really big breaches. They're like, oh, we had this breach 2 years ago. Here's the information. And you're like, well, that was helpful. So that's what they're talking about with timeliness. It's because they are trying to limit their, basically they're trying to limit their chance of getting sued. So a lot of times they are reticent to reveal certain things, and that can cause problems with that open source intelligence. And some of the stuff you like talking about the DMV breach or things like that, some of the stuff you can't reveal all of the information because it's, it's PII, it's stuff that you can't reveal without causing further problems with the breach, so there is also that problem as well. CISCP privacy protections. So protection, explanation, and example. So there's CISA, which I actually subscribe to these and I have for a long time. They have CISA mailers and email lists, and it's really, really useful. CISA is a federal law passed in 2015 that provides authority for cybersecurity information sharing between the private sector, state and local governments, and federal government. CISA requires a non-federal entity to remove any information from a cyber threat indicator that it knows at the time of sharing to be a PII, personal information of a specific individual, or information that identifies a specific individual that is not directly related to a cybersecurity threat. So basically, they sanitize the information and make it available. Freedom of Information Act. This was passed in 1967 and provides the public the right to request access to records from any federal agency. Although federal agencies are required to disclose any information requested under this, there are 9 exemptions, one of which protects interests such as personal privacy. It's very difficult to get through some of the hoops that are required for the Freedom of Information Act. Just so you're aware. Now, as I was talking about CISA, you can go out to their website and you can sign up for their mailers. And if you are going to be in cybersecurity, I highly suggest you do this, because there are tons of different things that you can get on that are just really useful. Traffic Light Protocol. TLP is a set of designations used to ensure that sensitive information is shared only with the appropriate audience. TLP uses 4 colors, red, amber, green, and white, to indicate the expected sharing limitation to be applied by the recipients. Now, I actually created, when I worked for the school district, a simplified version of TLP to explain to users, this is what you should and should not be sharing. Red being, of course, things like HIPAA records and stuff like that, to show like the super extreme end of don't share this, and white being what's called directory information, and that's information that's already published. For some reason, that traffic light protocol really is something that audiences react well to, and because it's been used over and over again, at least within American audiences, it really does work well in explaining your policies. Protected Critical Infrastructure Information, or PCII. The PCII Act of 2002 protects private sector infrastructure information that is voluntarily shared with the government for the purposes of Homeland Security. Now, the key there is voluntarily and Homeland Security. To qualify for PCII protections, information must be related to the security of the critical infrastructure, voluntarily submitted, and not submitted in place of compliance with a regulatory requirement. So basically, you have to have voluntarily submitted it. It has to be part of some sort of critical infrastructure. And if there's some sort of regulatory requirement, compliance already in place, then this, you still have to submit that stuff. You can't be like, oh, but I submitted this. That doesn't count. You can't circumvent those regulatory things that are already there with this PCII. Closed source intelligence. It is proprietary, meaning that it is owned by an entity that has exclusive rights to it. Source of threat intelligence, vulnerability databases, a repository of known vulnerabilities and information about how they've been exploited. Threat maps illustrate cyber threats overlaid on a diagrammatic representation of geographical area. File and code repository. Victims of an attack can upload malicious files and software code that can then be examined. Dark web. Some security professionals and organizations use the dark web on a limited basis to look for signs that information critical to the enterprise is being sought out or sold on the dark web. There are what are called dark web brokers, and sometimes depending on your company, you can have cybersecurity professionals that pose as those brokers just to check and see if this information is being sold. Okay, knowledge check. Which of the following statements reflects the correct order of intelligence cycle? Collection, requirements, analysis, dissemination, and feedback, requirement, collection, analysis, dissemination, and feedback. Analysis, connection, requirement, dissemination, feedback. At least they left feedback in one place. Collection, analysis, requirement, dissemination, and feedback. Okay, let's see what they have. Good job, B. Requirements, collection, analysis, dissemination, feedback. I think they figured everyone would remember feedbacks at the end. Okay, studying attack frameworks. Cybersecurity framework is a series of documented processes used to define policies and procedures for implementation and management of security controls in an enterprise environment. Attack frameworks of how attacks occur and can also be studied. These serve as models of thinking and actions of today's threat actors. The following are three of the most common attack frameworks. We talked about the top one a little bit, but this is the MITRE attack. This is a knowledge base of attacker techniques that have been broken down and contain classification in detail. There's also the Diamond model of intrusion analysis. This is a framework for examining network intrusion events. And then there's also what's called the cyber kill chain. This is a set of steps used to break into a web server or computer network that is based on the military's systematic process of targeting and engaging an enemy. See what I mean about you're going to see some of the military stuff that's being used? Yep, that's right there. So this is the Diamond model of intrusion analysis. So you have one, the adversary. This one's using the People's Liberation Army on this one, and some other things. Capabilities, families of unique custom malware, post-infection second stage tools, and then they have a use of an exploit kit leveraged by Asian hackers. And then there's that CVE you see down there. That's one that you can look up online. Usually if you type in CVE and that number, it'll tell you the vulnerability that they're talking about from the vulnerability database. Infrastructure, global command and control infrastructure, Chinese dynamic DNS infrastructure provider, attack registered domains. Their victims, governments in Southeast Asia, international organizations such as Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and public and private energy organizations. This is just an example with that being used. Okay. So this is another one of the frameworks. This is reconnaissance, weaponize, deliver, exploit, install, command and control actions on objectives. So reconnaissance for this one, harvest email addresses, company information, etc. Weaponize, couple, exploit with backdoor into deliverable payload. Yep. Delivery, this is the kill chain one. Deliver weaponized bundle to the victim via email, web, USB, etc. Exploit vulnerabilities to, I don't know why they didn't put that on here, but yeah, this is an example of what the kill chain looks like. Exploit vulnerabilities to execute code on a victim system. Installation, install your malware on the asset. Command and control. Command channel for remote manipulation of a victim. What they're talking about there is the command and control servers. Actions on objectives with hands-on keyboard access. Intruders accomplish their original goal. Conducting threat research. Now, I find this very fascinating, and this is a big field. So if you're like into research and things like that, this is a really good field. So reputational research, looking into past actions. Some security vendors compile domain reputation databases that track the credibility of web domains by assigning a reputation score. If you've ever dealt with any sort of spam filter, a lot of times they will look at web links and email links, and they use something that looks like this. Behavioral research, acknowledging the importance of human behavior when designing, building, and using cybersecurity technology. There is a crossover that if you've got any interest in the social sciences, this is the area where you really want to go. A numerical score is usually assigned to vulnerability based on the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, or CVSS. Vulnerabilities with higher CVSS scores may not always be the ones that should be addressed first. So sometimes if they have a higher score, that may be bad, but they might also be something that is really, really not likely to happen. Whereas one that's got a slightly lower score might be something that is much more likely to happen. These questions about vulnerability may help in identifying which ones need early attention. Can the vulnerability be addressed in a reasonable amount of time, or would it take several days or even weeks to fix? Can the vulnerability be exploited by an external threat actor, or would exploitation require the person be sitting at a computer or in a vice president's office? So thinking about what types of things they need to access to get into that. If the vulnerability led to a threat actor infiltrating the system, would she be able to pivot to more important systems, or would they be isolated? Is the data on the affected device sensitive, or is it public? Meaning, if they get in, is it really going to do anything? Is the vulnerability on a critical system that runs core business process, or is it on a remote device that's rarely used? So that's, you remember how we talked about the traffic light, and a lot of times you'll see those threat modeling where they have the red, green, and all that stuff. This is also part of assessing that. You take this information into your likelihood of whether or not this is actually going to happen. So if you have, let's say you have a vulnerability that you would have to physically be sitting at a computer that is behind 3 different locked doors and a man trap, and you have to go through like 2 different types of biometric things, do you think that's probably going to get a lower likelihood of happening than something that's out on a public web server? You know, things like that. You know what's funny? Some of the secretaries and admin assistants from where I worked, those ladies, woo, I would not mess with them. I had a contentious divorce and told them, hey, my spouse is not supposed to be allowed in the building. And yeah, that was not ever a problem with those ladies up there. Always make friends with your administrative assistants. Okay, discussion activity. Shanaz is researching security appliances and needs the devices to accept threat data and intelligence using a standard machine readable open framework. This is one you guys can think about. This is one of those ones that I think would turn into more like a paper, because there are lots of different security appliances that you can use. Me, I tend to go out and research everything, so I wouldn't have just said open indicator. But this is what they are talking about. So yes, you know, Linux, you could use Linux. It's OSINT, you know, but I tend to go OSINT, but then my brain makes it much more complicated, and I go, what types of OSINT can we get into? So yeah, this is a good one to think about for what types of things you can use. Yeah, exactly. That's what happens to me. OSINT, but these are the types of OSINT that you can use. All right, principles of a cyber attack. Defenders cannot always assume the most likely course of action by the threat actor. Defenders must take into account all unlikely events and be prepared for them. Given the same tool, different adversaries may have different capabilities to use it. Only the attacker knows when an attack starts and ends. Principles in the physical world may not always translate into the cyber world. Some attacks can be from an individual, while others can be from large groups. There's a wide spectrum of adversaries' abilities, capabilities, and goals. So there's a type of sociology and psychology to attempting to figure out what type of threat actor and what types of courses of action they might have. And it's kind of a trap to narrow your field of view, because if you think, oh, this is this type of thing, and they suddenly take a right turn and you're like, oh, I was not expecting that, then you have just cut out all of these. Exactly. You have just cut out all of these possibilities by shortening your response time and saying, hey, I think it's this, so I'm only going to do ABC. And they take a right turn and you're like, well, poo, now what do I do? So don't always assume that they're going to do the exact same thing, because, you know, you can see patterns and go, hey, I think this might be happening, but this could also happen. So be prepared for other options. All right, which of the following enables the exchange of cyber threat indicators between parties through computer-to-computer communications? Now, this is another one of those fun ones. Hopefully you remember the letters. Couple more guesses and I'll hit the thing so you can see which one it is. Okay. Automated indicator sharing. So this is your computer-to-computer communication. And don't feel bad. It's one of those ones that I was talking about. You're going to bring that up forever. Cup. Oh, stop grumbling, kitty. But no, this is one of those. I will always want to look up things like this, and flashcards are your friend. Okay, definition of threat modeling. Threat modeling is a proactive strategy for evaluating risks that involves identifying potential threats, remember that, potential threats, and developing tests to detect and respond to those potential threats. Advantages: you address new threats, become more proactive, and develop a deeper level of understanding, and you also prioritize threats and mitigation. These are components of a threat modeling process. Adversary capabilities: assessing the attacker's intent, ability, capability, skills, tenacity, and available resources. Nation-state actors have a higher adversary capability than your unintentional insiders. So knowing everything from 0 to 10, so if you say unintentional insiders are, 0, and nation-state actors are 10, and then knowing everybody in between. Total attack surface: the sum total of the number of different attack points. Typically, larger enterprises have higher total attack surfaces. So the more moving parts that you have in your network, the more attack surface you have for them to get to. Attack vector: the method used to compromise a vulnerability. Examples include weak authentication credentials, misconfigurations, malware, and poorly implemented cryptography. Impact: the effect or influence of the attack on the enterprise. Now, there's a lot of these that people don't think about. Reputational damage: a lot of people forget that one. Fines by government or regulatory agencies, and of course, a big one, loss of customers. Likelihood: the probability of an attack occurring and being successful, that can range from low to very high. So yeah, if you have a ton of IoT devices, you have a larger attack surface. Yes, good point. So threat modeling methodologies. So there's the attack tree. This displays the goal of the attack, the type of attacks that may occur, and the techniques used in the attack. later proved to be entirely too simplistic to be of real value to an enterprise. There's Octave, which is practice, the operational critical threat asset and vulnerability evaluation methodology is designed for assessing non-technical organizational risks that may result from compromised data. And like that one right there, non-technical organizational risks. There's always a bunch of different types of risks when you're talking about threats, when you're talking about risks and threat modeling. Trike, this is acceptable risk. Trike threat modeling is an open source threat modeling process that is designed to satisfy the security auditing process from a cyber risk management perspective. I love some of these. PASTA, the process for attack simulation and threat analysis methodology. Sometimes I think they come up with the name and then stuff letters in there later. Aligns business objectives with technical requirements while taking into account business impact analysis and compliance requirements. Combines an attacker-centric perspective on potential threats with risk and impact analysis. Stride, developer, spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information message disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privilege. Most useful when creating a risk-aware corporate culture and is very customizable to an organization's specific security objectives and risk environment. VAST Enterprise, the visual, agile, and simple threat modeling, VAST is what that stands for, methodology, addresses the weaknesses and implementation challenges in other threat modeling methodologies. When choosing your threat model methodology, there's 3 primary considerations. The outputs of the model should be considered. The ability to scale across hundreds or even thousands of threat models must be taken into consideration. And what is your overall goal that is based on the enterprise's requirements? Do you need more technical stuff? Do you not need more technical stuff? Things like that. Okay, so that is it for that module. All right, does anyone have any questions, or have you been washed out with all the acronyms for the evening? We are done. We have enough. Okay. All right. Well, if you guys have any questions, stick around. Otherwise, have a good night. I'm going to hit the end of the recording here.